All right, so we're going to kind of do this a little bit backwards from how I think it should go, but this is sort of how the book covers it. So we'll do this. I'll cover writing and reading at the same time, and then we'll jump over into PyCharm and look at that, because I think reading out is a lot easier to start with because you know you're not going to mess anything up. But they cover writing first, which it's fine. It's not a big deal. All right, so writing data to a file. What's great about the open function is it returns a file object, and those file objects are essentially a module. Okay, you remember how we talked about modules? We can use dot notation. So we can have a module dot some function, and that function does a thing, right? So we had import random, and then we could use random dot rand int to generate an integer, right? So this file object is just like that. We can use dot notation to reach inside of that file object and access some very, very useful little methods that have been written for us that can be really, really, really helpful. All right, so again, this method, we've been exposed to this. Randint is one of these, randrange is one of these. This method is a function that belongs to an object. Okay, so it performs operations using that object. Now we've already seen one of these already. Obviously, we have used f.close. Okay, so we know what dot notation is. I have an object here, and then I use the dot notation, and I called in and I used this function close. Okay, now we know it's a function because it has these parentheses. So we know it's a function. All right, so this file object actually has a method associated with it called close. So we know at least it has one, right? So again, we can also assume that it has some other ones as well, right? So file object's write method is used to write data to the file, okay? And write is a little bit easier to remember in terms of the functionality of it, right? Because it's just write. There's really nothing more complicated with it. With the read functions, there are a few more things that we need to remember. But writing is really easy. It's just f.write. Okay, so it's file variable. We opened ours as f.write, and then the string that you want to write in. Okay, that's as simple as it is. So again, it needs to be closed whenever you're done closing it. So that's how you write to a file. So we have currently opened up a file right here. So technically, we could write to that file if I have it in append or write mode, right? And I could actually just write some data to the file, either overwrite it or append on that by going f.write. Okay, and then I just have to put some string in here, and boom, we would write some information there. Now, because I have it in read-only mode, I'm sure you can assume if I run this, it's going to have trouble, right? It says IO unsupported operation, not writable. Now, it's not writable because I opened it in read-only mode. Now, if I went ahead and opened that in append, I could actually write I love horses, right? We'll just keeping the theme here. So now with io.txt, I have it in append. I can write IO or I love horses. Boom, I've done that. Now let's go ahead and go over to our io.txt, and you can see I wrote I love horses there at the very end. Now, note, this I love horses is just buttered up right up against that last line, right? Now, the reason why is because we didn't add a new line to it. We actually just appended it right to the end of the file, okay? Because it doesn't know whether you need a new line or you don't need a new line. So we didn't tell it to put a new line in there, so it just wrote it at the end. Now, I can hit enter and go ahead and add a new line in. I can get rid of this period because I'm a little bit OCD. So now we have I love horses here. Now, we can try that again, only this time, let's play around with adding a new line, okay? And we're going to say, I don't know, butterflies. There we go. All right, so we're going to go ahead and run this and see if it goes ahead and modifies that file with the additional new line in there. So let's go ahead and hit run. And let's move on over and look, and there we go. I love butterflies right there. Okay, we can go back and we can hit it again just to make sure it does the same thing. I went and hit the play button, and boom, I have I love butterflies. Okay, so that's sort of how the write function works. Now, I'm going to show you how destructive the W function is. So I'm going to write in W here, and then we're just going to say I love cats, and then I love dogs. Okay, so we'll kind of recover it here. But remember, here is my io.txt. Okay, I love cats, I love dogs and cats, and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now that I've opened it in write mode, and when I run this, you're going to notice, okay, I just ran it. Now when I open it back up, it just have I love cats, I love dogs. Now to make this obvious, I'm going to type in something that we don't have yet at all. This is something new. Okay, so this is totally new. Here's my io.txt. I'm going to run this with W mode, and boom, it just overwrote everything. Okay, so use the W mode very, very, very carefully. All right, so now that we have sort of covered the writing concepts, right? So we have the W and the A methods that we can actually append and write. We're going to jump over here to the read method. Okay, so we have a write method and we have a read method. So again, the read method, this file object is giving us a method that reads the entire contents into memory. Okay, so it only works if the file's been opened for reading and the contents are returned as a complete string. Okay, so we have the read method, which just reads it all in. Okay, that means it's not going to go line at a time. It's just going to give you the whole contents. We also have another method called the read line method. Now, this is one that we're going to use more often, and this one actually will read just a line at a time from the file. Now, we can do the read method, and we can save that as a string, and then we can do search queries on the string. Or we can do the read line method, where we actually just read it a line at a time and then do inline searches. Okay, and I'll kind of show you both of these. Now, there's something that you need to understand, especially with this readline concept, is there's a read position. So you could imagine like a record player or something. As that head is moving across the surface of that record, it has a finite position, like where it is located. Same thing happens with a file, right? So when we're reading in a file, we have this thing called a read position, and that read position marks the location of the next item to be read from a file. So if we use the read method, the read position starts at the very beginning, and then once we call the read method, it is at the very, very end, and then we close it. With the read line method, the read position starts at the very beginning, it reads out one line, and then the read position is at the second line. And then it reads out one line, and the read position is at the third line, and it does this until it reaches the end of the file, or EOF, okay? So at the end of file, then it says, hey, there's no more lines, so then we close it, okay? So that's the read position, marks the location of the next item to be read from the file. So again, we can, and I've already shown you this a little bit, you can concatenate a new line, or you can strip it from a string, right? So I showed you the I love butterflies idea, okay? So I wrote in I love butterflies, it just stuck it right at the end of the last string, right? So it said I love horses, I believe. And the end of the read position, essentially, or the write position, I should say, was just at the very end of that line, okay? Because I didn't have a new line in there, it just said I love butterflies, and it didn't add anything at the end, right? So we have to make sure that we go ahead and concatenate new line strings, or new line characters to the end of strings, right? Or get rid of them, right? If we don't want that new line, we can actually get rid of that as well. Okay, so in most cases, data items written to a file or value is referenced by variables. They're not generally going to have a new line at the end of them. Usually it's necessary to concatenate a new line to data before writing it. Okay, so this is carried out using the plus operator in the argument. Okay, now if you're just writing it directly writing a string, you can just add the /n at the end of the string. And then there's sometimes also that you need to have a way to sort of pull those off, especially if you're reading stuff in. You don't want to have all your data peppered with this /n thing going on, okay? Now, to be able to do that, you can actually use a method from that file object called the rstrip method, and that's a string method, or not the file object, from the string itself. That'll actually get rid of specific characters from the end of that string. So you can, and honestly, it's not just the /n, you can also pull out, spaces and stuff like that. Okay, so again, I've showed you the W, I've showed you the A, so we can either write, which overwrites everything, or we can append using the A mode. And again, the way the append works is if the file exists, it's not erased. If it does not exist, it's created, and then the data is written at the end of the current contents. Okay, so with the write, it just opens it up, writes over everything, closes it down. Okay, well, and actually we close it. With append, if the file exists, it opens the file and it appends to the end. If the file doesn't exist, it sort of acts like write. It'll create a new file, open it, and then it writes the contents in. Okay, so that's the way that append works. I generally say that you should be using the append function in a general sense, unless you're troubleshooting, right? So if you create this very, very fresh project where you're practicing writing data to the file in a specific sort of format, you're probably going to want to use W, so it's just overwriting it over and over and over until you have that format correct, and then you start appending when you want to start actually adding data to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back here and let's mess around with some of these read and read line methods in PyCharm. Okay, so we have this. This is something new written in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just go back to what we were doing. So we're going to write in I love cats, I believe is the first thing that I did, which my wife would be happy because she loves cats. So we're going to write I love cats first. Love cats. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and write this in there. Now, you'll notice there's something missing. Okay, and the thing missing is a new line. And I want to show you what that means. Okay, so I'm just going to write this in without a new line. All right, so now I've written that in and I have I love cats. So now that I want to keep I love cats, I want to go ahead and I fickle finger of fate there. I want to go ahead and change this mode to A. Okay, so now I'm going to be appending. Now I'm going to write I love dogs over here. And I want you to predict where it's going to write it. Okay? Take a second. Think about it. There is no new line. Where is this going to write it? All right, so let's go ahead and hit go, see what happens. All right, obviously it wrote it right at the end of I love cats because we didn't put in a new line. Okay? So why don't we say I love horses, and let's add a new line at the beginning. Now, again, and this is it was a little bit of a hiccup earlier, and I'm going to really point this out to you. Now, if I put a new line here, I want you to look at this. I love cats, I love dogs. Okay, here's where our right position is. No new line is there. Where do you think I love horses is going to be written? Okay, there's no new line, right? So it's going to butt up right against I love dogs, right? All right, so let's run it, make sure that we're correct there. And boom, I love horses. Now, let's go ahead and type in I love butterflies. Where do you think this is going to print? Okay, I have a new line here, and if you'll remember, we did put a new line here. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it and see where that's going to be. All right, I love butterflies is on the next line. Okay, now that I'm in append mode and I'm just adding line after line, or new line after new line after new line, now I can run it and I can run it and I can run it and I can run it, and you're going to see I'm just adding lines. Okay, so because I'm adding that new line in there, it's actually giving it a better format. All right, so that's the write function with the append function. Now, if I wanted to say, oh man, that first line kind of stinks, I could just turn this into write. I could start off with a new line at the end, and I can hit go, and now I've just started with I love butterflies. Okay, so that's the I love, or that's the sorry, not I love. That is the writing functionality, the writing and the appending functionality. Okay, make sure that you remember that you have the new line option. And it's going to be very, very useful in sort of formatting your files, especially if they're ASCII files or text files. If it's all just one giant line, it can get really, really, really cumbersome and hard to read. Okay, so we're going to mess around here. Actually, it looks like we're at time. So it looks like I'm going to go ahead and jump over to another video, and we're going to talk about read. So I'll see you on the other side.